Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing this morning? Wow, is it ever still smoky outside? It's quite incredible. Just got back from a little walk with my dog, and yeah, you can still feel the heaviness. Anyway, so welcome. Thanks for being here this morning. It feels dark in my office as it is because of the smoke and just the gray skies out there. I've done everything I can to increase the light, but it's not working. Anyway, good morning. Welcome. I'm Wendy Johnstone, and I'm one of the caregiver coaches and program consultants at Family Caregivers of BC, and it's always a pleasure to be here for our Facebook Live sessions. Today we're talking about balancing work and caregiving. Oh, I just don't even know if it's possible, to really balance work and caregiving. Yeah, it's always going to be a little bit of a stretch on both ends. A few things to get us started. We're going to talk a bit about just the realities of the statistics around caregiving, and it is pretty shocking when you see the statistics that half of all Canadians over the age of 15 report having to provide care to someone they know. More than half of these caregivers, so about 35%, are also trying to balance their paid employment with unpaid caregiving responsibilities. And of those, caregivers, 30% are in that sandwich generation of women ages 35 to 44. I probably don't need to tell you, the value of this unpaid care. It's significant to all aspects of society. In particular, of course, it's incredibly important to the people that need the care and that are able to have the care from family caregivers. So we also know that family caregiving helps reduce the pressure on our healthcare system by allowing the people that are being cared for to remain at home or to receive different types of support that just aren't available through other avenues or through other, expensive treatments, or even having to move into some form of paid assisted living or supportive living. However, having said that, what we hear, quite a number of our callers coming into the caregiver support line and through our emails are paid caregivers, and what they're worried about really are creating stability and stability in their own lives. But one of those pillars is financial. And more we've been hearing from family caregivers that it's been really hard to understand, what's available through different, government funding opportunities. And by funding, I don't mean to fund caregivers directly, but usually it's tax credit, the compassionate care benefits, those types of programs. Now, we won't be able to get into that today because it's very, unique, and it's very specific to the person, but we will kind of touch on this idea of working with our employers or working with other individuals in our workplace on ways that we can try and balance our caregiving with paid work. So as we know, caregivers end up providing the bulk of support and care to their loved ones. The range is sort of between 70 and 80% of all care is being provided by family caregivers. In most cases, their work and care that kind of goes largely recognized by employers, and that's for a lot of reasons. Sometimes caregivers, don't self-identify, they don't speak up about their situation because they're worried, or they don't think, they don't want to share that type of personal information, or it just doesn't come up, in conversation. But it can also feel, or to caregivers, that they're vulnerable, and there's many things that caregivers end up doing, in the workplace. Where it impacts their career. They end up, doing reduced hours. They have to work, try and find this ability, to work specific jobs that allow them more flexibility. They end up having to maybe pay financially for some of the care that the care recipient can't afford, or that's not available, through the public healthcare system. And so working caregivers, they end up reporting an increase feelings of stress, being overwhelmed, this idea of this emotional labor of caregiving on top of the physical aspects. Sometimes what employers see on the flip side is that working caregivers have to at times arrive late. They have to leave early. Sometimes they seem distracted by the wide variety of tasks that they're trying to manage while they're working. They often feel quite tired at work. And so on both ends, you can see where you're trying to have this conversation, this balance, even between the employee, the working employee who's caregiving, and the employer. A recent examination of of Canada's compassionate care benefit also suggests that even where benefits are available, that family caregivers can experience these challenges in trying to negotiate the system, and which we find very complicated, not only in the financial piece but also the healthcare system navigation piece. And so family members were concerned with the limitation of the benefits, and we often see this in our phone calls as well, such as strict eligibility criteria and these relatively short durations of assistance. And for those family caregivers that don't have any paid leave or job security, it makes the situation even more stressful. So we don't have all the answers today. I wish we did. I wish we had, a magic formula. I think, what we all are recognizing is that there isn't, that kind of magic wand that can fix everything. But we do hope to create this forum and this opportunity to talk about some of those challenges and to really encourage family caregivers to use this as a resource to even, problem solve together, or to talk through a process, or to become more aware, so that when you're trying to balance work and caregiving, you know what the real issues are, and you can speak to people with them, with more authority, or using some statistical information, or what's really relevant to yourself. One of the really interesting things that I just recently learned, I suppose I knew it, but I didn't really understand it, was this idea that employers were actually, they're obligated to follow the Canadian Human Rights Acts to adjust their rules and policy or practices. This idea of duty to accommodate that negatively impact individuals or groups of individuals based on this idea of prohibited grounds of discrimination. And so family status, which includes a person's caregiving responsibility, is actually identified as that grounds for discrimination. So then for employers, this duty to accommodate is actually needed and required if the employee isn't able to fully participate at their workplace because they're a caregiver. Now, the flip side of this, of course, is that the working caregiver, they have to show that all the other alternatives to their caregiving situation are not available, and that there is this obligation for them to take on this caregiving role. So I sometimes hesitate about some of these conversations because sometimes it feels like it's putting more work on the caregiver. However, one of the key things that we have found in our work with family caregivers here at FCBC is this idea of the value of getting our ducks in a row. So it can be really helpful. So, for example, and we often do this with caregivers when they're concerned about the person that they're caring for, and they're trying to articulate, or they're trying to frame, what the real priority is or what the real concerns are. And so it's just about the kind of the documentation piece, or writing the story with a lens that highlights the major challenges. So in this case, it's about caregivers being able to write or to express why providing care is not a personal choice, why they need to do it, and that's going to sort of reflect in for example, like you can think of a couple of working caregivers where the one caregiver is caring for an adult child at home who has severe debilitating migraines and chronic fatigue, and so she's not able to work, and she's not often able to work regular hours because the chronic fatigue of her daughter and the severe migraines have created this scenario where it's changed sleep patterns. And so she's having to document this information for the person she's working for, the company she's working for, to show that it's not a personal choice. There's no one else to care for for her daughter, because of, the circumstances and what, home support or what various other supports can do. It doesn't fit the need of the person being cared for. This idea of showing that, what alternatives are available and if they've been explored, and, what the efforts were or being made to try and facilitate balancing the work of the caregiver as well as providing care to the care recipient, and how these efforts, weren't able to fully work, and, what the employee, what you can do as a working caregiver in terms of, flexibility and being able to support aspects of your work, but also what you need from your employer. So as I say that and as I speak that, it does sound like more work for caregivers, but in another breath, caregivers tell us that often going through that process is really helpful. So having a list of those questions, or even having a sample, might be a helpful tool that we can help create. The other thing that might be helpful too is having a friend or support help you with articulating that, with writing it down, to also provide the subjective perspective, but also a really caring eye. And often, two brains are better than one, except for when it comes to teenagers. Sometimes two teenagers equals half of a brain. I'm learning that. Balancing work and caregiving situations, they vary tremendously. And so not, one single action plan is going to work for everyone. So having that other person to bounce off those ideas with, can also help, bring perspective, but also bring different ideas. So here are a few other ideas for balancing the role of being a caregiver and with work. And again, I realize that sometimes this feels like more, more personal work. But we do find that having insight into where we're at as a caregiver is really helpful. So if, for example, what are your current needs? And that's, a very practical aspect in terms of, the needs for the person you're caring for you to be able to do that, your own personal needs as a working individual, and then also your own needs in your own personal self-care. Going back to this example of this working caregiver I was speaking to the other day, she was feeling like, gosh, she just wasn't making a lot of progress. And we reflected back, to the previous call that we had. And, between the two of us, we were able to, arrive at a place that maybe it wasn't exactly what she was hoping for, but that, for example, the family GP was actually, working towards this real diagnosis to help with providing more eligibility for one of the government programs. The second one was that they were able to, engage, one other person in that family to come help give a little bit of respite, who was in their bubble, because we're also dealing with COVID as well. And then the third one was that, she really identified that even though it doesn't feel like she's doing much, her two practices of meditation, and she said that's sometimes 5 minutes a day, and trying to get outside in whatever that is, sitting outside on her veranda or going for a small walk. That's all that she can do, but those were these consistent, features that she was, this idea that they're still making some progress. So sometimes progress is really small. It's also important to look back and reflect and give ourselves that hope and encouragement that we are able to, find these small ways, which often validate, okay, we can keep going forward. So that's a really, important piece around the insight into what we really need as caregivers who are working and caring. And with that, I think comes this idea of being really honest and proactive. I'm a big believer in optimism and being positive. I'm also a real big believer in being honest, and because I think we can be both. So this idea of how do you describe the situation with the person that you report to or your employer before it really becomes a lot larger and a lot harder to manage, then, can start working on an action plan sooner versus later. It's also, for them to know that you're also committed to your position, that you really want to try and figure out how can we find a plan going forward. So also this idea of just being really honest with ourselves, and try not to sugarcoat things too much. Being clear about what you think you can manage. I was reading yesterday in this really interesting magazine called Simplicity Magazine, that generally, as human beings, we tend to overestimate our abilities. And so this idea of trying to be really realistic on what we can accomplish is often, it's often less than what we think it can be in a day. It's different when you look at a year or, over a lifetime. So try to learn what support is available, and understanding with your current workplace, what's afforded. Flexibility, is there someone that can, cover for you if you need to leave the office? Have you been open about your elder care situation? And if you haven't, what's holding you back, or what are your concerns? Are you comfortable talking to your employer about your situation? If not, is there someone else you can connect with first, to help you move into that position? Really understanding what policies the person that you're working for have in place to support working caregivers. And that might be, for example, if there's someone who works with HR in your company, that can be a place to start. Now, you'll often hear me, talk about this idea of documentation, and I know sometimes it seems like it's a big pain in the what, but this idea of documenting, keeping track of information about caregiving in particular, that's really helpful in the impact it's having on yourself, but also how it's impacting your ability to fulfill your duties is also, just for your own self, it really is a valuable reference, especially when you're having to deal with, say you need some support from your family physician, in order to support that cause, when you're actually, dealing with your employer or colleagues. It's a good process to go through, because it helps create the story, and it helps create very factual information around what you're able to do and where you're having some challenges. And I know we say this, a lot, and I think it's because we truly believe it, and we truly see the difference it can make for family caregivers, this idea of putting, your own oxygen mask on first. We recognize it's not an easy task. We recognize that some days it just doesn't happen. But that, this idea of taking on a role as a caregiver, it often happens when our life is already full. And so we talk about this idea of trying to squeeze everything into our busy life without letting anything else go. And so, self-care comes in many different packages, and it looks very different for each individual. And I think it's really important to honor yourself as, that unique individual. It is trying to find a way, to meet one of your own needs, or a portion of your own needs, to help yourself feel better supported. We also, and more grounded in the approach. There's a lot of, moving parts, working caregivers, sandwich generation, caregiving. There's a lot of moving parts. So even finding one small way, as part of a daily practice where possible, or once or twice a week, where you put your oxygen mask on first, is something to strive towards, or something to keep of top of mind in terms of awareness. So as we finish up today, where to find more supports and resources, just to understand that, here at Family Caregivers of BC, we're here to support you through our caregiver support line. It's available Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. And we can really support you based on your unique needs and help bring awareness into your situation. We'll listen to you, we'll suggest ideas and resources. We can also refer you into one-to-one support through our coaching service. if that's going to be helpful and if that's relevant, we have some virtual caregiver support groups and other caregivers. They're a great place to talk about this idea of balancing work and caregiving. We've got our podcasts, which can provide this great avenue of support to hear other people's stories and their journey as well, and how it can often flow within ours. You can find those on our website as well. I was thinking to myself that we actually have staff who are caring for someone and they're working as well. And so, there's a few of us at Family Caregivers of BC that, that are also struggling and also, working to try and balance this idea of working and caring for a loved one. So we hope that this has been helpful. We hope it's provided some insight or some ideas, bring out more awareness into the situation of trying to balance work and caregiving. I hope you all have a wonderful few weeks and stay safe and keep those lungs as healthy as possible. And let's hope that this smoke clears up soon, and wishing you all the best, and we'll see you in a few weeks. Bye for now.